You mentioned Coach Prime and you mentioned Colorado. And I hate to go to this topic every single week, but it's difficult not to
It's
because
compelling.
it's compelling, it's interesting. And honestly, like if you're not talking about it, then what the hell are you talking about? I mean, there's a lot of things in sports that you could talk about, but over the weekend, the hype train that was Colorado went to Eugene, Oregon, and what you and I both thought was going to happen happened, where Oregon, a vastly superior football team in just about every way, took care of business and blew out the Colorado Buffaloes. And that really wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was everything that happened before and everything that has happened since in the narratives that are surrounding this game. I don't know. That's how I feel. But before we get into some of that, I just want to hear your thoughts first on Colorado, what they've done up until this point, and on what they showed with, I believe, Dan Lanning, coach of Oregon, and the speech that everybody is kind of harping on right now. And then we'll get into the nuances of this because there are many of them.
Yeah. So first, I think that what Coach Prime has done at Colorado is nothing short of miraculous, flipping this roster that quickly, turning them into a contender. Colorado is a good school, and they had a Heisman Trophy winner in 1994. They won a national championship in 1990. So it's not like this is, DeVry or Phoenix Online or something like that. This is a real school with a real proud tradition, but they've been terrible for the last few years. In 2016, I think they won 10 games, and besides that, they haven't won more than 8 games, I think, since 2001, something like that.
It's been a
So,
while.
yeah, it's been a long time. So, what he's been able to do there has been fantastic. But Oregon was a 21 point favorite going into this game. That line, I even thought that line was a little too favorable to Colorado when it was released. People who want to take shots at Coach Prime, they can get their shots in right now. But those of us who follow the college football very, very seriously knew that Colorado was going to absolutely get worked in this game. Like, they had no shot.
If you've watched football at all, you would
Yeah.
have to know that Colorado is going to get rolled. But I think what got lost in all of this, just my opinion, is what you talked about, the miraculous nature of what he has done. To take a program that had one win prior and really nothing to build on, because many times these guys take over a program, they have something to build on. But at Colorado, you can make the argument that they had next to nothing, and that showed in how we used the transfer portal. What were there, 3 guys from last year's squad on the team?
Yeah, something like that.
It's extremely low. And to do what he is doing, it's a win regardless of what happens in the overall end of the season, right? With whatever their record is, they're probably 2 or 3 years ahead of schedule. You could make that argument. And it's because of what he has done there. And people, I think, are missing the boat on that completely and focusing in on, well, they got rolled in this game. Well, they should have, because it'd be more of an indictment probably on Oregon if they struggled in this game.
Yeah, and the thing is that one thing that we found in college football that you can't do in the transfer portal is play in the trenches. You can't build an offensive or defensive line through the portal. You can get pieces here and there that fit in. Certainly my team, the Michigan Wolverines, have done that over the last couple of years, bringing in high quality offensive linemen to plug and play. But you cannot build an entire offensive line out of whole cloth in the transfer portal. It doesn't work. You have to develop in the system, play for years, build continuity. And so a team like Oregon that has that is always going to manhandle a team like Colorado that doesn't have it, especially when Oregon can match or even exceed at the other positions. I mean, Bo Nix is a legitimate Heisman contender. He's a better quarterback than Shadur Sanders. So,
Yeah,
Colorado,
right now, doesn't mean Shadur Sanders can't get
right.
better.
But
in this
right
moment,
now,
coming into this game, Bo
yes.
Nix was a legitimate quarterback. And
Yes.
even though I felt like he'd been in the league for 8 years, but my point being is they should have rolled them in this game. But what made news to me was, again, nothing on the football field. It had everything to do with all the pregame hype. Now, I get it, okay? Like, you and I both know that there are fan bases and there are media outlets that hype all these teams that we just get sick of hearing about. Like Mike Greenberg talks about the Jets, the Cowboys, the Packers, Aaron Rodgers. We get tired of hearing of those things. And I think it'd be fair if you felt like, okay, I'm tired of hearing about Colorado. Fine, right? There's a lot of good stories in college football, but it's the most compelling story in the country, bar none, in any sport. I will gladly sit here and say this. And so ESPN, of course, talks about how they get access to Oregon's locker room pregame. And you hear the speech and everything. And I mean, to surmise it, basically, it was, we're here for wins and not clicks. I don't remember exactly what he said, but that was the gist of it. And it seemed very personal. To me, it did anyway. And the play on the field kind of felt that way, too, because they weren't letting up on the gas pedal. And it was a weird thing because there are so many narratives now about it that I felt like are just kind of crazy. Like, to me, it felt like Don't most coaches use locker room material like this to motivate their team? The only part of it that I took not offense to necessarily was he let them in the locker room for a reason. Like he didn't have to do that. That part of it is what I felt like, okay, that feels like an intentional move. Like it's performative at that point. But if he says that behind closed doors, who cares? That's what coaches do all the time.
I agree with you that it's performative, but the word performative implies inauthenticity, and I don't think it was inauthentic at all. Like I think
That's fair.
he let them in to see what he was going to say anyways, and he was smart to do that. So first of all, this speech was also done for clicks, but I don't think it matters. This is a sport that is played on the field and in recruiting, you have to be on social media. That's where I mean, every listener out there has teenagers. You know they're on social media all the time. Well, that's who these college coaches are trying to recruit to come play for them. So you have to be on social media. You have to be viral. He knew the speech would do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with this speech. I mean, he said that they're about substance and not style. They're going to put an end to the Hollywood story. And that's true. I mean, the Ducks are more about substance than style. Their uniforms exempted. Colorado is more style than substance right now, which Coach Prime himself has even referred to. He went on game day and said that he said once I get the big boys I need to look out. He knows he doesn't have the lines to compete against an Oregon right now. So I can see why Coach Prime would try to use that speech as fuel for himself and for his squad. There was nothing wrong with this speech. It was a great speech to the team. And honestly, Dan Lanning could have come out and been like, he could just say nothing. He could just walk out of the room and they still would have won by 42 points because Oregon is that much better than Colorado.
You're 100% right about the fact that it was a recruiting or it was a recruiting measure. Like he's thinking about the kids that could want to go to Oregon after this season, not the kids that are on this team right now. And yes, I probably used the wrong word performative, but I think you understood what I was
Right.
trying to say was
Yes.
by allowing them in, it was intentional, but he meant what he said. Like
Mhm.
he wanted to go out there and do what they did. And to prove a point really to their kids or to his kids that they are a great football team. And I think that they did that. But I noticed, though, and I'm sure you did too, that there are a lot of people who are super happy about this in a way that was so uncomfortable, so unreasonable, and just these people must not experience joy anywhere in their life.
I'd like to see a Venn diagram of people who were at January 6th and people who don't like Coach Prime. And it can't be a flat circle because there's so many people that don't like Coach Prime that weren't there, but attitudinally, you know what I mean, right? Like there's people don't like Coach Prime and they didn't like Prime Time as a player either. And it's for the same reason, and it seems pretty clear the reason why that is.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a guy who has bravado, who has also accolades to go with this bravado. Most people, you and I included, do not like people who talk too much and never perform, right?
Mhm.
You're talking about the Kadarius Tonys of the world, brick hands. But the point being is that Deion Sanders has walked the walk and talked the talk in many avenues, just about everything that he has done
Mhm.
in the pros, in college, in baseball, in broadcasting, and now he's a coach. And he's done success or had success everywhere that he has gone. So if you don't like his shtick, it's because you don't like people who are successful, because you yourself are probably not successful, at least in my opinion. But I said last week to Cleve that the thing that they have in common was that they're mostly old and mostly white. And I'm happy
Yes.
to say that because it is true.
Yes.
Most of the people that I have talked to that are like, I can't stand this guy, have that in common. And then it's not an indictment on every single white person out there. It just is a fact of the matter that these are the people that I'm talking to. And I'm glad to not be one of those people, to be able to look at it and say, and I think I said this to you, college football is supposed to be fun, and this is like the best kind of fun that college football needs because I'm tired of Nick Saban, quite honestly.
Yes. And so yeah, I have a few thoughts on that. So first of all, for the listeners who might not be able to tell, I am in fact black. So when I get on this tie right here, that can be important for people who can't see me.
Honestly, it would
But
have been funnier if they didn't know.
that is true.
Yeah.
Just having no idea. But so first of all, the people who are old now and don't like him weren't old when he was coming into the league in 1989, and they still didn't like him then. So while age is important, right? It's not like they were like, oh, huge fans when they were 30. Now they're sick of him when he's 60, right? The reason that this story with Coach Prime has so many racial, I mean, overtones, right? To it is that Deion Sanders is bringing an overwhelming blackness to college football. It's making people uncomfortable what he's doing. the worst kind of white people and status quo white people tend to actually be okay with the presence of black people. They're not okay with the presence of blackness, especially when it's overwhelming like this. College football coaching is a predominantly white profession. And what Dan Sanders is doing is that he's showing that you can be successful while being unapologetically black in what you're doing. It's a difference between what he's doing here and somebody like Barack Obama as president. Barack Obama was a president who was black. He was not overwhelmingly black culturally as president. The fact that Dion is successful and is going to continue to be successful will make people uncomfortable. And the thing is that if you are uncomfortable with Dion, with his shtick, what he represents, that doesn't actually say anything particularly negative about you personally. In the United States, whiteness and white culture is seen as the norm. And so for white people, primetime, Deion Sanders feels like an counterculture outsider coming in. For black people, it's the same as Muhammad Ali or Colin Kaepernick or anybody else who seems disruptive to white people, but we're just like, or Martin Luther King, right? Like people who seem disruptive, but they're like, it's just a reverend or he's just a boxer. Like he's just sort of doing his thing. I do want to say too that I personally would not choose to play for Deion Sanders.
Really?
Yeah, because because there's many different ways to be black culturally, and religious and swaggy is not me. I am neither of those things. But I would sign up to play for Marcus Freeman or James Franklin in a second. And what Deion Sanders is doing at Colorado is going to open the door for so many other young black head coaches to get gigs that will. So people who like Deion can go play for Deion. People like me who would not have chosen to play for Deion Sanders will I ignore Nick Saban, ignore Dabo Sweeney, ignore Brian Kelly because Marcus Freeman and James Franklin and others like them are options. And there's going to be more of those options. And that is what's making people uncomfortable, really, even if they don't quite realize it. The presence of black people is not unsettling anymore, especially in public places. But blackness is, especially when it's a scenario where you're not expecting it.
Yeah, I definitely see your point on that. And it's a nuance. Like I said, there are a lot of nuances to this that I think need to be explored because it's not, for lack of a better term, a black and white issue in terms of the global idea of it. But even me on social media has seen a lot of black people arguing with other black people about Deion Sanders and his place and what he is doing. And I think it's speaking to exactly what you're talking about, that people aren't realizing what this is going to turn into, that this doesn't have to be your representation of the way that you experience black culture. It can be something else. You can find that something else. And I think that in this, you're absolutely right. The Marcus Freemans of the world, the James Franklins of the world, who are successful in their own right, doing it their own way, are going to have more of a platform because Notre Dame right now is theoretically on the rise, right? They're in a good place with Marcus Freeman at the helm, the way that he is doing business. And I think people are missing the point in that completely in terms of Deion Sanders. Like they're so married to the flashiness. It doesn't have to be representative of every single black coach that's out there. It's the fact that what he is doing is opening these doors. And I even said, and maybe this is too hyperbolic, but I said the best thing would be Deion Sanders across from the field from Nick Saban for the national title. Like this would be the representation of him and this movement being the norm in college football. You want to talk about opening doors. That would be something that would be incredible. Appointment television wouldn't even begin to describe what that would be.
I don't think Nick Saban is actually the proper allegory for Deion Sanders on the other
That's
side,
fair.
although he's obviously the most successful. I think it's Dabo Sweeney.
Yes.
Right. Overly religious, in my opinion, cult of personality. I don't think Deion's really doing a lot of the X's and O's, right? I think he's more like the motivational type, which is fine, but that's true with Dabo too, right? I think that's more what it's like. The difference is that once people see how successful Deion Sanders is at building programs because of being able to recruit the players to come play for him, every major program is going to realize that they're going to need an engaging black head coach to be able to compete with all the other engaging black head coaches. Notre Dame and Penn State are going to see an uptick in recruiting now because of Deion Sanders, because they have Freeman and Franklin. So if you're, say, Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL next year and you're Michigan looking to hire a coach, some stodgy old white guy might not be the way to go, even if they are otherwise qualified, because what Deion is doing. Because the players you're recruiting are not stodgy old white guys, and it's not going to have to be the only option anymore. And that's what makes people uncomfortable.
Do you think this will translate or could translate to the NFL as well? Because the NFL has a well-documented issue with black representation at the head coach, in that there's 32 head coaches, but not many black head coaches, and how representative black people are in the workforce in the
Yes.
NFL. Do you think that this could lead to something like that in the future?
Yes, but not directly, not because I don't think it's going to be, oh, look at what Dan Sanders is doing at the college level. We need to hire more black coaches in the NFL. I think Deion will create more opportunities for black head coaches in the college ranks by necessity to be able to keep up with recruiting. And therefore, with those opportunities at the college level will come opportunities at the NFL level, right? We're going to start getting black Steve Spurriers, Jim Harbaughs, Nick Sabans that then have the opportunity to go coach in the NFL after, because of Deion. So the NFL won't like seek to hire Deion or somebody like him, but other coaches will get opportunities because of what Deion is doing now.
Not to derail how amazing this back and forth is, but what would a black Dabo Swinney look like?
I think he'd be about 6'1", blazing speed, Jerry curl in college, loved to wear gold, referred to himself by his own nickname, sunglasses and hats. Like, I really do think that they're just different culture, same idea. And I would never play for Dabo either.
I'm not even sure I would play for Dabo, and I
No.
probably look more the part than what he generally tends to like on his teams. But I mean, you bring up a lot of great points about Coach Prime, and I was sad to see how negative and how much vitriol there was over the fact that he lost a damn football game. And you're right, it's rooted in a lot of different things. And